Why is it that we keep dancing around the edges of relationships that drain us, knowing deep down they're nothing but elaborate games of emotional chess? You know the signs, the hot and cold behavior, the constant guessing, the way your phone becomes both your greatest comfort and deepest source of anxiety. And yet, you keep playing. What if I told you that the moment you truly step away from these games is the moment everything changes? Not just for you, but for them too. Think about it. Those relationships where you're constantly analyzing texts, second-guessing yourself, and walking on eggshells, they're not relationships at all. They're psychological battlegrounds where nobody truly wins. I've been there, many of us have, caught in the web of someone who seemed to derive their power from keeping me uncertain, unbalanced, and uncomfortably eager for their approval. But here's what happens when you finally stop playing their games. First, you need to recognize what's happening. These games aren't random. They're patterns designed to create specific outcomes. When someone pulls away just as things get good, that's a game. When they text you constantly for days, then disappear without explanation, that's a game. When they make plans with you, then cancel last minute to see if you'll still be available next time, that's a game. These aren't miscommunications. They're not coincidences. They're calculated moves designed to establish control. The question isn't whether you're being manipulated. The question is why you've allowed it to continue. Pause and reflect on that. You were likely raised to be understanding, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to be patient with others' emotional processes. Admirable qualities, all of them. But in the hands of someone who plays games, these virtues become vulnerabilities to exploit. The hot and cold treatment isn't just annoying, it's addictive. When someone gives you intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable moments of attention and affection after periods of neglect, they're activating the same neural pathways that make gambling so compelling. You never know when you'll win, so you keep playing. Those brief highs when they finally respond, when they're suddenly warm and present after days of distance, they flood your brain with dopamine, and your brain learns to crave that rush, even when it comes at the cost of your emotional well-being. You start to mistake anxiety for butterflies. You confuse emotional exhaustion with depth of feeling. You interpret your constant preoccupation with them as proof of connection, when it's actually evidence of psychological distress. But here's what most people don't realize. The person playing these games is often just as trapped as you are. The people who orchestrate these emotional labyrinths aren't villains in some romantic drama. They're people with their own deep insecurities, often terrified of genuine intimacy. They create distance because closeness feels threatened. They maintain control because vulnerability feels dangerous. They keep you guessing because if you knew the truth, that they're scared, confused, and often deeply wounded, you might not see them as worth the chase anymore. Their behavior isn't a sign of power, it's evidence of fear. And while understanding this might generate compassion, it shouldn't persuade you to keep playing a game where you're set up to lose. Because that's the truth. These games aren't designed for mutual growth or authentic connection. They're designed to keep one person feeling secure at the expense of another's peace of mind. So what happens when you stop playing? The first thing is often nothing, and that nothing is everything. The absence of anxiety when you put down your phone without checking it for the 100th time. The quiet settling in your chest when you stop constructing elaborate texts designed to elicit a specific response. The strange, unfamiliar feeling of your thoughts being your own again, not constantly hijacked by someone else's inconsistency. But then something shifts when you truly step away from the game, not as a manipulation tactic, not as a way to make them chase you, but as a genuine reclamation of your time and emotional energy. The dynamic fundamentally changes. They reach out, often with increased urgency or intensity. They sense the shift in power and try to reel you back in. They may even accuse you of playing games in a stunning display of psychological projection. This is where most people make a critical mistake. They interpret this renewed interest as proof that the strategy worked and they re-engage with the dynamic. But that's just rejoining the game at a different level. The real power comes not from their reaction, but from your newfound clarity. When you stop playing their games, you create space to remember who you were before this relationship consumed so much of your mental and emotional bandwidth. You rediscover interests you'd set aside. You reconnect with friends you'd neglected. You remember that your worth isn't determined by someone else's inconsistent attention. And here's what's fascinating. When they realize that their usual tactics no longer work, one of two things happen. Either they escalate the games to try to regain control, in which case the toxic nature of the dynamic becomes impossible to ignore, or they're forced to show up authentically without the shields and strategies they have been hiding behind. In both scenarios, you win. because you finally get to see the truth. In my experience, she lost control when I stopped playing her games, not because I'd outmaneuvered her, not because I'd found some clever way to beat her at her own game, but because I'd remembered that relationships aren't games at all. Her texts became increasingly frantic. She started showing up places she knew I would be. The carefully curated aloofness disappeared, replaced by a naked need for attention that had been there all along. And in that moment, I felt no triumph, only sadness for all the time we'd wasted dancing around authenticity. I realized then that her control had always been an illusion, maintained only by my willing participation. If you're caught in someone's game right now, know this: walking away doesn't require a grand announcement or a detailed explanation. In fact, those often just create openings for further manipulation. True change happens quietly, in the small decisions you make each day. It's choosing not to check their social media. It's allowing yourself to take hours, even days, to respond to non-urgent messages. It's making plans that excite you without considering whether they'll approve, or be jealous, or finally realize what they're missing. It's remembering that while love involves compromise, it should never require you to compromise your dignity or peace of mind. When you stop playing their games, you can create a new set of standards for the relationships you allow into your life. People who are consistent in their communication and behavior. People whose words align with their action. People who don't make you question your reality or your worth. People who understand that real connection isn't about power or control, but about mutual growth and support. These aren't unreasonable expectations. They're the bare minimum for healthy attachment. And yes, healthy can sometimes feel boring at first when you've been addicted to the drama of uncertainty. The steady presence of someone reliable can seem underwhelming compared to the emotional rollercoaster you've grown accustomed to. But give it time. What you'll discover is that when you're not expending all your energy trying to decipher someone's mixed signals, you have so much more to give to the relationship and to receive from it. The connections that grow in this space of mutual respect and clear communication have a depth and richness that game-playing relationships can never achieve. Here's the truth that transformed everything for me. Control is not the same as connection. Someone can control your thoughts, your emotions, your schedule, and still have no real connection to who you truly are. And connection, real, authentic connection, requires the courage to be seen, not as the always available, never needy, perfectly calibrated version of yourself that you think they want, but as the complex, sometimes messy, gloriously real human being that you are. When I stopped playing her games, she did lose control. But what I gained wasn't control over her. It was freedom for myself, freedom to be present in my own life, freedom to recognize manipulation without feeling compelled to respond to it, freedom to hold space for authentic relationships that don't require strategic thinking or emotional contortion. Think about the games you're playing right now, the texts you're overthinking, the feelings you're hiding, the parts of yourself you're contorting to maintain someone else's interest or approval. Now imagine setting all of that down. Imagine reclaiming all that energy and redirecting it toward your growth, your peace, your authentic connections with others who don't require you to diminish yourself. That's not just the end of their game, it's the beginning of your freedom. And trust me when I say nothing, no carefully crafted text, no moment of their attention, no temporary victory in these endless emotional chess matches. Nothing feels as good as that freedom. You deserve relationships that feel like sanctuary, not strategy. And they exist, not with people who play games, but with those who are brave enough to show up consistently and authentically, ready to build something real with you. The game ends when you decide it does.